Scott Ritter, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you very much for joining us. What do you believe President Trump hoped to achieve last week in China, and what did he achieve?
I think in order to answer that, we have to go back to what he hoped to achieve in April when the trip was first scheduled. And This was part of a power play that was, crafted by Scott Bessent, Marco Rubio, and Pete Hegseth that sought to confront Xi Jinping with the overwhelming strength of American military, economic, and political power. I believe he was hoping to show up with the figurative heads of Venezuela and Iran in his hands to throw them on the table in front of Xi Jinping and say, we control your oil. And if you want us to turn the oil back on, you have to start playing ball with us. He was going to push on trade. He was going to push on the Pacific, Taiwan. This was going to be a full frontal assault, a diplomatic assault, backed by the threat of economic power and the indirect threat of military power. One only has to refer back to the National Security Strategy of the United States published in November of last year, where the United States said we seek conventional military overmatch with China, meaning that our military is so unquestionably superior to that of China that they understand they have no chance and will back down immediately. So I think, this falling through with this sentiment, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, talking about, breaking China, bringing it to its knees, using tariffs and other things. Marco Rubio talking about the isolation of China, playing a silly game where we could seek to drive a wedge between China and Russia. That's always been a fantasy of the United States and continues to be a fantasy of the Trump administration. The problem is spelled in 4 letters, IRAN, Iran. We lost. We lost this war, straight up lost this war. And now, instead of holding all the cards, as Trump likes to say, we hold no cards, or we're playing a game of Uno where we hold all the cards, but that's not the way the game's supposed to be played. So here, the Chinese are basically in the driver's seat. They are the ones with the diplomatic advantage. The United States has lost all of its military advantage against China, especially conventionally. We basically burned through our long-range, standoff weapons. We burned through our missile interceptors. We don't have the ability to rebuild them, and even if we could, we can't because, gosh, the sensitive electronics and stuff require products that are produced from rare earth minerals, to include, permanent magnets. And China corners the market on that. We would need China to rebuild the weapons we need to reassert ourselves militarily. And China's just not going to play that game. So Trump came crawling in, I think, thinking that he could somehow still emerge dominant, that he could bluff his way through, that Xi Jinping wouldn't understand how weak the United States was. But Xi Jinping understood perfectly where the United States was. He schooled Donald Trump and the administration and embarrassed him in the process. And again, I'm going to butcher it, the Thucydides trap that he spoke of. Again, it isn't, something that's the name of the historian that wrote the history of the Peloponnesian Wars, the wars between Athens, a established power, and Sparta, an aspiring power on the rise. And he basically said, we need to avoid this trap of these two nations having only one course of action, which is to fight one another. That's the end of the established power, Athens, and by extension, the United States. And this is, it was Xi Jinping making the threats. They were veiled, but they were threats nonetheless. Not just competitors he talked about, but conflict. And China basically put it on the line. When it comes to Taiwan, China is ready to have open conflict with the United States. It's China that has conventional military overmatch today, not the United States. So this was a humiliation for this president. Of course, in a couple of days, Vladimir Putin arrives in China, and we're going to see a completely different reception, different kind of meeting. Rather than splitting China and Russia apart, Trump is going to find the hard reality that we have brought them closer together. And one of the things that they're going to agree upon is Iran and the unacceptability of continued military action, which, of course, Donald Trump continues to threaten on a daily basis.
I wonder if Trump even got the message from President Xi that it will not stand by and allow the Israelis to dismember Iran, and it will not try and talk Iran into any kind of surrender of sovereignty, which Trump claims he asked President Xi to do.
I don't think Trump got any message. Again, we return to the Thucydides trap. And again, I might be butchering that word, but I'm a Marine.
No, you're not. We all know what you're talking about, and you're saying it beautifully.
You know, the thing there is that Donald Trump didn't have a clue what Xi Jinping was talking about. This is evident in the fact that when he got back to whatever residence he was staying in, and once he conferred with his immediate circle, he put out the most ridiculous post, social media post, saying that Xi Jinping says that we are a power in decline. Xi Jinping never said that. Trump just assumed that that's what Xi Jinping was saying, that we are power in decline. And he said, we were under Biden. And so he politicized it. He said, but today we're the hottest thing in the world for the last 16 months. We are red hot, smoking hot. We're the best. And Xi Jinping knows this. The man is so divorced from reality, it's not even funny. I don't think he got any of the messages that were sent. Marco Rubio appears to understand that Taiwan will never be the same after this. He understands the sensitivity and the inevitability that Taiwan will return to China. They haven't agreed upon a timetable yet, but Trump has no clue about what's going on. Scott Bessent has no clue about what's going on. Marco Rubio has a little bit of clue, but Pete Hegseth literally has no clue. The lies that he's allowed to be told. I mean, when you had Bradley Cooper testify for the United States Senate the other day, claiming great success in the air campaign against Iran, straight up lie, documented lies. We know that's not the case.
This is the admiral in charge of CENTCOM, correct?
Correct. And yet by promulgating these lies to Congress, he, perpetuates the notion of American military prowess, that the American military is something to be feared and that nations will fear it. Well, Iran doesn't fear it. They already withstood 37 days of the best we can do. And you think we're going to do any better? We're not. And China watched it and realized we got nothing. The Sunday punch that everybody feared turned out to be, a Thursday jab, and not even a very good one. The kind of jab that's delivered after a night at the bar drinking too many beers. Trump lives in Never Neverland, but this is where it gets really dangerous, because this is the time when we need reality to sink in, not just with China that's not playing games on Taiwan. I mean, this is life and death. This is existential. They're not playing games, but by extension, Ukraine and the stupidity of Europe and Ukraine pushing Russia, to a point where existential questions now are now on the table, where Russia has no choice but to take decisive action. And the kind of action that's being discussed by the people who are very close to Vladimir Putin and who has exerted influence on Putin in the last 2 years, it means war, literal war between Russia and Europe, and potentially the United States, a war that could become nuclear overnight. We need realists in Washington, D.C., people who have their finger on the pulse of reality, not these fantasists who rally around, this sickened cult of personality where a man raises golden monuments to himself and has religious figures pray. Did he not read the Bible and understand that you don't erect, gold monuments of idols? You don't engage in idolatry. I mean, Trump is just out there in la la land. It's very dangerous, very dangerous.
Is he preparing more bombing? And if so, did he not learn? Hegseth not learn, General Kane not learn, whoever advises them not learn anything from the past 2 months?
I mean, the answer is yes, they are preparing something. What my understanding is, what they're preparing is a very short and extraordinarily violent campaign that's being pursued for political purposes only, meaning that the off-ramp right now, because it's very hard for Trump, who has no diplomatic skills whatsoever and is unable to, weave in facts into any narrative. It's very hard for him to, accept a peace at this point in time, because it would be common knowledge that the United States have been defeated. He's not having luck spinning success out of what is obviously disaster. He can't put lipstick on this pig. So they want a very short, very violent campaign. The Americans want it so that Trump can declare victory. Now he can say any agreement he has is only because he showed strength and proved to the Iranians who's in charge. And that's why the Iranians did X, Y, and Z. hoping that people don't read the small print. But the Israelis have a different game. They're expecting the United States to withdraw at some point in time. And so what Israel is seeking to do is put a marker on the table for this new Israeli UAE alliance that's emerging, this Jewish Sparta, so to speak, that's going to rise up and challenge Iran. The United Arab Emirates has all but divorced the Gulf Arab states, the GCC. They're on their own. They withdrew from OPEC Plus. They're producing oil that's designed not just to enrich them, but to empower an Israeli UAE alliance. They are, Benjamin Netanyahu let the cat out of the bag by saying he visited recently, and there's open acknowledgement that Israeli troops are on the soil of the United Arab Emirates providing air defense coverage for the UAE, and that Israel has coordinated with the United Arab Emirates to carry out offensive actions against Iran. So, Israel has a longer game being played. Remember, Benjamin Netanyahu just gave a presentation where he said in 10 years' time he wants to cut all financial ties with the United States. In order to do that, he needs an alternative source of funding, and that alternative source of funding is, in his warped worldview, the United Arab Emirates.
How dangerous for Iran is this Israeli UAE alliance?
No, it ends within 48 hours of manifesting itself. Iran right now, don't listen to, again, Donald Trump, 13%. Bradley Cooper, similar numbers. Don't even listen to the CIA that directly contradicts them, saying 75% of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. And don't even listen to other reporting from the CIA about 90% in certain areas. Listen to Aragchi, 120%. That means Iran has not only reconstituted the totality of the missile force that was expended, not lost through military action, expended during the war, but they've expanded by 20%. They're at 120% capacity. Now, how can you do that if, according to Bradley Cooper, we've eradicated their ballistic missile production facility? It's because he's lying through his teeth. We know for a fact that Iran dismantled their ballistic missile production capabilities and transferred it underground, and that they are currently producing a wide variety of missiles to include solid rocket propellant missiles of the most advanced characteristics. 120%. Iran is locked and loaded. They've already picked all their targets, and they've been very public about it. The moment you strike us, this is going to happen, and this is the eradication of the United Arab Emirates' energy production capacity. I don't know if Iran is going to strike desalination plants, because to do that will literally kill a nation. Literally kill a nation. Abu Dhabi right now, it's over 50 degrees. Same thing with Dubai. You have to have water, fresh water, which United Arab Emirates
say 50 degrees, you mean Celsius. You mean 100 degrees
Correct.
Fahrenheit.
120 degrees. 120 degrees. You remove air conditioning, it's uninhabitable. You remove water, and it's literally uninhabitable. And Iran has made it clear that they will kill the United Arab Emirates. Physically kill, terminate the nation. And it can be done very easily, and Iran has the missiles to do that. Again, Russia and China have sent the message to the United States, and I believe at the BRICS meeting, where Iran publicly called out the United Arab Emirates for this, the recent BRICS foreign minister meeting in India, I think Russia and China also put the marker down for the UAE, that you're pretty much on your own. And hopefully they get the message. But we have two regimes. We have the Netanyahu regime, and then we have the United Arab Emirates royal family that recognize that the writing is on the wall. They are not long for this world. So what we're seeing with this alliance is a last act of desperation of men who understand that history is about to close the chapter on their respective political legacies.
Some breaking news, CNBC reporting. President Trump said Monday, this would be just a few minutes ago. You ready for this, Scott? He is calling off a plan to attack Iran on Tuesday after the heads of 3 regional powers in the Middle East asked him to hold off. Trump, in a Truth Social post, said he has informed U.S. military leaders, quote, that we will not, in caps, be doing the scheduled attack of Iran tomorrow in light of these requests. What do you make of this?
Well, what I make is the only move he can make. Because to attack Iran, I just told you what the consequences are. These are known no's. They're knowables. Wow. There's nobody disputing what will happen. Everybody agrees that if Trump attacks Iran, the global economy is going to collapse, inclusive of the American economy. Trump is already looking at a disaster in November, an absolute disaster. If he attacks Iran, not only is he going to lose the House and be impeached, it's a guarantee this is going to happen, unless, of course, he finds a way to make elections go away, which, of course, since we don't live in a democracy but a cult of personality, who knows what will happen. But if the economy collapses, he will lose the Senate to the extent in which not just impeachment, but conviction becomes not just likely, but probable. That means not only is his political legacy finished, he's going to jail. And so is his family.
Do Trump and Netanyahu realize that they have failed to achieve a single one of their objectives in the war on Iran?
Well, to realize that, you have to be capable of self-reflection. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu understands that, but he's playing a game of absolute political desperation. This is a man who has an ongoing trial for corruption that he's going to lose. This is a man that once Israel starts carrying out the investigations into what happened on October 7th, what happened against Hezbollah, what happened with Yemen and what's happening with Iran, realize that this man who's the security prime minister has failed Israel egregiously, and there are criminal ramifications to what he has done, including murder on October 7th and gross negligence everywhere else. So he is desperate right now. Netanyahu is absolutely desperate. I don't think Trump has enough. He's such an egomaniac. He's such a narcissist that I don't think he is capable of self-reflection and introspection and saying, what am I doing? Am I going in the wrong direction? I think he truly believes. I mean, this is a man who will let religious figures erect a golden idol to him. This is a man who believes his faith believes, and there's heart to heart, his faith belongs on Mount Rushmore. This is a man who wants to rename every train station, bridge, and monument in America after himself. I mean, this is malignant narcissism. And I don't think he's capable. And he surrounded himself with yes men. I mean, Pete Hegseth is incapable of telling the truth because A, he's not smart enough to know what the truth is, and B, he's just bought in to what he's doing that he can't find anywhere. Rubio is probably the smartest one of the group, but Rubio also understands that, he's along for the ride, that it's not at the point right now where he can withdraw and still be politically viable. And Marco Rubio, of course, is another narcissist who wants to be president of the United States. Scott Bessent is just a sycophantic lunatic who will go down with the ship. But these are the people he has surrounded himself with. There's nobody going to stand up. And I mean, J.D. Vance has tried, but it's not worked. To stand up and say, Mr. President, you've just committed suicide, literal suicide. This is all over. The best thing J.D. Vance could do is resign at this point in time and say, I'm not doing this. You're a criminal. What you've done is criminal. The war is lost. You're now taking us down a different direction. Show some political courage to set the example for military leadership to then stand up and show political courage as well. These generals who are getting fired are generals who are fired because they're against it, but their silence is golden. You're supposed to be against it by saying, no, hell no, it's illegal. We're not doing it. Not shutting up as you get fired from your job. If one major political figure shows political courage, is willing to put it all on the line, to do the right thing and say, hell no, we won't go or whatever to this president, others will follow. But it takes that first person to show that act. And who amongst these sycophants is that person? And I don't see anybody but J.D. Vance.
Here is the worst of the people around him. Cut number 13, Chris.
So you're calling for strikes on the energy infrastructure, Senator?
I'm calling to hurt this regime. If you do the same old thing, you're going to get the same results. Hurt them more. Maybe they'll make a deal if you hurt them enough. But right now, I think they're trying to wait us out. I think they're playing games. And in the words of the president, I think they're crazy. I think he's right.
Yep, the perfume princess doing his thing. The interesting thing, though, is Graham is starting to have a little bit of introspection because he's saying if taking this stance means he loses his primary and is no longer in the Senate, that's a price he's willing to pay. At least he understands the potential political ramifications for what he's doing. But it doesn't matter at this point in time. He is so in bed with the defense industry and such. He's set for life. He doesn't need this job. In fact, this job has become a problem for him because we know Lindsey Graham. We know what he said about Donald Trump. We know what he feels about Donald Trump. He despises Donald Trump. He hates Donald Trump. He thinks Donald Trump is a thieving scoundrel, scumbag, whatever. And so Lindsey Graham is holding water right now because he's a neocon who worships war, and Trump has given him the war finally that Lindsey Graham always wanted. But Lindsey Graham just wants more war, and then he wants to resign and be able to sit on the boards of whatever industries are going to seek to rebuild the American military. But he is evil personified. I hope that in addition to the impeachment and conviction of Donald Trump, that we follow through with the impeachment or arrest and prosecution of people who have violated, the War Crimes Act. And here we have Lindsey Graham openly advocating for illegal wars of aggression. I'd like to hope that the American people one day will hold him accountable more than just voting him out of office, but putting his fat ass in jail.
Is Israel collapsing under the constant wars of Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, a lot of people aren't focused on the economic aspects of this and also the social aspects of this. There's huge divides in Israel today, huge divides. Netanyahu
80,000 Orthodox Jewish males, 80,000 who refuse to register for the draft. How does that go over with the rest of them?
Well, it's always been that case, though. The Orthodox, when I was in Israel in the late 1990s, late 1990s. Sorry, it's a long time ago. The Orthodox were always the same way. They weren't going to serve. Now Netanyahu is saying that everybody has to serve, so there is that divide. But there's also a growing number of people that aren't serving, and they're not Orthodox. They're just people who say we don't agree with the wars of Benjamin Netanyahu. You have the military, the reservists coming up, being told they're going to Lebanon, and they know that Lebanon's a death trap. A suicide rap, and they're just not going to do it. You have pilots that just aren't going to participate in these endless campaigns. So Netanyahu is literally on his way out. But that's the thing that might even hasten this is the economic collapse. I remind people that in September, I can't remember the exact date, about a month before October 7th, so the middle of September, when Biden was at in India for the G20 conference in New Delhi, he came out and he spoke about the India, Middle East, European economic corridor and how he was going to connect India, ships, containers were going to get on a ship in India, go to a port in the United Arab Emirates, get on a train, transit the UAE, go into China, go into Jordan, go through Israel, get to Haifa, get back on a ship, go to Greece, get off that ship and get to Europe. And this was his thing. This was the infrastructure plan that he had in place. Benjamin Netanyahu came out the same day in a speech that people have largely forgotten and said, this is the most important day in modern Israeli history. I'll say it again because people probably don't understand what I'm saying. The most important day in modern Israeli history. Why? Because it created the potential for Israel's not only economic liberation, but emancipation, Israel's viability. By creating this corridor, you add that to the Abrams Accord, which, of course, the diplomatic effort to bring Israel and the Gulf Arab states together, rapprochement, common cause, and Israel would emerge as the economic hub for the development of this region. Israel would become independently economically viable, which is essential for Zionism not only to thrive in its current form, but for greater Israel to take place. So, that's what he said. And now it's dead. Abrams Accord is finished, never going to happen. The economic corridor simply isn't going to happen. This means that Israel is economically doomed. The United States isn't going to underwrite Israel forever. Israel has no functioning economy worthy of the name. Who's going to pay for the reconstruction? And if Israel wants to play stupid games with, I'll tell you who's going to pay. United Arab Emirates. That's why they're cutting their special deal to get the UAE to start funding reconstruction to tighten up the relationship. But the UAE will be dead. So it leaves Israel alone. Israel is finished. We're looking at economic collapse. We're looking at political isolation. And basically what's going to happen is Israel become uninhabitable for millions of Israeli Jews who will leave Israel and go back to the lands from which they originated. And once you get that population drop, you get a demographic reality kicks in, and you can no longer speak of an independent Jewish homeland. You're speaking of a unified Palestinian state, and that's what you're going to get. I don't know what the time frame on this is. It could go fast. It could drag out. But this is the inevitable direction of Israel.
Wow. Scotty, thank you, my dear friend. Great analysis on all these points, and we didn't even talk about President Putin and the latest in Ukraine. Actually, let me ask you about that. The Ukrainians are attacking residential buildings in Moscow. Is Putin worried?
Putin's not worried about the residential abilities of Moscow. It won't be the first time that's happened. You were in Moscow. You remember Moscow City, the new New York City type places. That gleaming glass tower was struck twice by drones in the past. The Kremlin was hit by a drone once. So it's not that these individual drone strikes are what's going to put Vladimir Putin over the edge. What's going to put him over the edge is the fact that Germany, Britain, the Netherlands, Denmark, and others are building drones, modern long-range drones, and providing guidance capability, modern guidance capability with the assistance of Elon Musk and others, and providing the intelligence that enables the drones to navigate their way through air defense. Russia's a very big country. It's very hard to have continuous lines of overlapping integrated air defense. There are gaps that occur, and if you have good intelligence, you can weave through those gaps. And Ukraine is launching hundreds of these drones a day, built outside of Ukraine, so you can't interdict the manufacturing process, guided by NATO intelligence and, using German, guidance capabilities. And they're starting to have a meaningful impact on Russia's energy production capacity. By some estimates, anywhere from 10 to 20% of Russia's export capacity has been impacted by these new drone attacks. Now, they've always been hitting these oil places. Last November, when I was in Russia, I spoke with a member of the State Duma committee that was working on the protection of energy infrastructure from drone attack. And he said, look, they're hitting us, but it's not major attacks. We were able to mitigate the damage and repair it and get things back online. So even though it's politically embarrassing, on the big picture, it's just not having any impact. For the first time, it's not just politically embarrassing, but they're starting to have an economic impact that approaches existential in nature type impact. Now, this is important because up until now, Vladimir Putin has been sort of pushing back and you have a lot of naysayers out there, both in Russia, and now you have Gilbert Doctorow and others, blah, 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 but Putin didn't care, water off a duck's back kind of stuff. But now it's true. Now the economy is being impacted and something has to be done. And the question is, what will be done? In 2023, Sergei Karaganov, a very influential political scientist, wrote an article in which he said, because Russia is no longer just in a conflict with Ukraine, but with the collective West, with NATO, the United States, the EU, and they have declared their strategic intent to be the strategic defeat of Russia, meaning the physical destruction of Russia. Russia has no choice but to preempt them, to take them out first. And he said, we being Russia, need to use nuclear weapons preemptively against Europe. He said at that time that he doesn't believe the United States would be willing to sacrifice Boston for Poznan, a Polish city, meaning that if Russia was to strike Europe, that the United States wouldn't retaliate against Russia. Who knows? I don't want to test that hypothesis. But Vladimir Putin came out and said, no, that's not who we are. That's not what we do. But the strength of Karaganov's argument and the way it resonated, Putin had in 2024 to bring Karaganov in. Karaganov was tasked by the Kremlin to restructure, rethink, reframe Russia's strategic deterrent posture. And in 2025, last year, Russia published a new national security nuclear posture, which said that if nuclear powers, think United States, NATO, France, Great Britain, provide conventional strike capability, think long-range drones, to a non-nuclear power, think Ukraine, that threatens Russia's strategic viability, think hitting Russia's oil production, hitting defense industry facilities, then Russia is cleared hot to use nuclear weapons preemptively in response. Ukraine has literally, because of the Europeans and the passivity of the United States, crossed Russia's red line. And today there's ongoing active discussion about striking not just Ukraine, but Europe to include nuclear weapons. Now, Karaganov has said that the preferred methodology would be to strike Europe using the Oreshnik, and then which is a non-nuclear missile, and then if Europe didn't get it, then to respond immediately with tactical nuclear weapons. Today, by the way, Judge, Belarus is exercising its tactical nuclear force that Russia gave to them. They're in the field right now. They're practicing the methodologies used to release nuclear weapons. So it's not theoretical anymore. It's happening. Russia threatened to take out Kiev on Victory Day if they struck Moscow. They didn't strike Moscow, but now they're striking Moscow today. And if they strike St. Petersburg in a week and a half or so, Russia's not going to sit by. If they continue to strike Russia's oil infrastructure, Russia can't sit by. So I think basically the threat to eliminate Kiev is still on the table, and Russia's just looking for the opportunity. But I do believe that won't happen in isolation, that if the decision is made to strike Kiev decisively, they will strike major production facilities in Europe. We could be looking at the potential of a world war. Now, even if the United States doesn't respond, and this is my pitch that I make to everybody about arms control, because people are like, well, Scott, arms control is dead. You're damn right it's dead. But that's not a good thing. And in Russia, they don't care. I'm going to go to Russia and I'm going to wake them up, because I'm here to tell them that Karaganov is probably right, that if you hit Poznan or another European city, the United States will not respond with nuclear weapons against Russia. But if you think for 1 second the United States is going to yield the strategic nuclear deterrence advantage to Russia, going from a hypothetical potential user of nuclear weapons to a nation that has demonstrated it can and will use nuclear weapons, and we're sitting there saying we're still hypothetical, that ain't going to happen either. We will have to go up and use nuclear weapons, and we'll use it against a close ally of Russia. Let's call it Iran. And we will nuke Iran in a heartbeat if that happens. And then we begin the long, slow process of one-upsmanship, and it all ends with the absolute exchange of nuclear weapons. The world ends. Every computer simulation ends this way. And there's no reason to believe that somehow the wisdom of Sergei Karaganov, I call it the Karaganov fallacy, that somehow his wisdom avoids this trap. No, this is the trap of mutually assured destruction, mutual suicide, and we need to avoid it at all costs.
Whew. Well, that's enough to keep everybody awake at night. Well, thank you.
Look, Judge, I'm not going to lie. I mean,
no, I'm praising you for your intellectual honesty.
These bags right here, I don't sleep at night because of this stuff. I spend all night working, wrestling these issues, trying to figure out how best, because, we get back to, we go back to 2002, 2003, the Iraq War. It was fought over the lies of weapons of mass destruction. Who the hell knew more about weapons of mass destruction in the Western world than me? Nobody. I knew more than the CIA knew. I knew more than the British knew, because I was the central focal point of the global intelligence effort. I knew the truth, the absolute truth, and nothing but the truth. And you would think, empowered by this certainty of knowledge, that I would have been able to move policy, to shift policy, to stop a war that shouldn't have been fought. And I didn't. And that keeps me up at night too. What did I do wrong? So now I'm looking at a situation where I know I'm 100% right on my calculations about the threat of nuclear war. How do I better articulate this than what I'm doing right now? Because to fail is not an option. I mean, I'm going to just steal that from Apollo 13. Failure is not an option here. We must succeed. There has to be success. And the question is how to do it. And this is why I can't go to Russia and be passive. The Russians are players here. They are literally players in this game. And because the United States is so grossly irresponsible, it's going to be up to the Russians to make the right move, the Russians to be pragmatic, the Russians to be responsible at a time when it's almost impossible for them to be so because of the actions of Ukraine and because of the actions of Europe.
Well, thank you, Scotty. Thank you for all the thought you give to this. Thank you for your extraordinarily brilliant articulation of it. I don't even think you came up for air during all that. And best of luck in all you do. Thank you for being here, my dear friend. We'll look forward to seeing you before you begin your travels.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. All the best. Wow. A lot to think about, my dear friends. We'll get into all of it tomorrow, Tuesday, with Ambassador Chaz Freeman. I'm also going to ask him a lot about China at 8 in the morning. Professor Mearsheimer at 9. Professor Deason at 1:15, Professor Jeffrey Sachs at 2 o'clock, and at 3 o'clock, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.